yeah, I'll be going over a voice agent product that my company own, and we just be talking through like some of the problems it solves and what goes on behind the scenes. So yeah, in this section, in this section, we will learn why voice agents, how voice agents actually work. Then from LLMs to agentic systems, we'll actually learn about that. And this is me, Olu. Artemis Tech Ventures is a technology company just focused on building AI-powered solutions for businesses. We internally have two products, Voicelink, which is an AI voice agent platform for helping people handle interviews, sales support, and booking appointments. Cloud AI, which is a platform that leverages AI to help people find leads and automate their outreach. Then we also partner with organizations to build bespoke solutions for them. So why voice agents? You might ask. I came at it from this angle, which was very very interesting. Just prepping for this. Yeah, businesses are expected to provide fast, consistent, and always available customer interaction. Yet traditional support models are increasingly difficult and expensive to scale. Customer support is costing businesses like tons of billions and trillions of dollars. Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, so it's turning like it's costing businesses so much. And according to these statistics, if you see the last one, this is 3 in 4 consumers say a bad interaction with a business just ruins their day. And more times than not, they just leave immediately. Like they don't even bother. Like some of them are kind enough to give negative reviews, but most of them don't even bother. They just move on to the competitor. So like having very very solid customer support, it's no longer a thing where it's an afterthought. It's a competitive advantage, for businesses. Yeah. So the reality, opportunities are often won or lost in the first interaction. The challenge is being available for every one of them. Interestingly, like I was having a challenge, today. I use Blink security. I don't know how many of us actually use it. So like I use Blink just as a camera outside my house. So like it was recording. I'm getting notifications, but like I'm not seeing the clips. Okay, something is going on. Then I had to like call, like their customer support. Like I had to call like several times before like I was able to speak to someone. I mean, I've committed to the software already, so like I'm already paying. But I imagine it was a scenario where like I'm a new customer, just trying them for the first time, and I'm trying to reach their support, and like no one is picking up. I most likely just move on to the competitor immediately without even thinking twice about it. So every missed call, every delayed response, every unanswered inquiry is potentially a lost customer, a lost sale, a lost hire, a lost business opportunity. Now, businesses rely on humans, to handle every conversation. This creates a bottleneck, as volume grows. Now, that's not to say that humans are the problem, because in the world right now we tend to get into the debate of AI versus humans. Like that's not the point. The point is that there's only so much, that like people can really handle. So like there's only so much a person can handle at a point in time. Once you are having so many volumes, then people get overwhelmed, people get stressed, people make mistakes and stuff like that. So yeah, there are so many missed opportunities. Anyways, I'm just going to move on. So in terms of the solution, AI voice agents, they actually combine the availability of softwares with the conversational abilities of humans. They are available 24/7. They respond instantly. They handle repetitive conversations. They can help you qualify leads, candidates. They can help you book appointments. They can escalate to humans when needed. This is very, very important. Knowing when to actually escalate, versus just making stuff up. The result is faster response time, lower operational cost, and more captured opportunities. In terms of how voice agent actually works, which is like the technical bits, so it's at an high level, there are 3 steps involved. There's a transcriber, there's the model, and there's the voice. Essentially, there's a speech to text. When we say something, it's actually converted into the text, and it's fed into the LLM, which is actually the brain of the system that actually processes things, and there's a response that is generated, and it's actually converted back to voice for whoever is speaking with the voice agent. I will go into it in a bit more depth. Now, digging a bit deeper. Now, there's the voice itself that I've mentioned. When as I'm speaking to you, like this is my voice, it's getting converted into binary, going into the system, it's fed into the speech-to-text engine, again, fed into the large language model. But the part that wasn't, like that they didn't mention in this previous step was the tools and business systems. This is actually what's, this is actually where a lot of the magic actually happens. Down the slides, I'll talk about like LLM versus RNS, but just to give a brief, prior to us just getting there. So LLM is the brain. LLM is what gives the intelligence, but ultimately, what determines the capability of an AI system is actually the tools, that you actually provide the LLM with. So an LLM with a tool to send an email would be able to send an email on your behalf. An LLM with a tool to be able to access the customer data would be able to answer customer information. An LLM with a tool would be able to get things done, but an LLM without it is probably just done. So yeah, the tools and business systems, those are very, 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 very key, in any voice agent systems. There's CRM lookups, to be able to answer questions related to customers. There's things like calendar scheduling, access to APIs, for the Google Calendar APIs, the Carl.com, Calendly, the likes of them. Knowledge base for information retrieval, external APIs to do more things. And yeah, as I said, the final result is actually converted back to speech, and everything actually happens in real time. Now, yeah, so the LLM is only one component. Most business value comes from the tools and systems it can actually access. Now, in terms of an actual, production grade voice agent system, because there's a big difference between just having a proof of concept, something that is good enough for a demo, and something that is actually would need to be used by actual customers. There's a very, very big difference, and some of these things are actually what I highlighted here. There's the communication layer. In terms of actual people, they will most likely pick up their phone and dial the support number to actually speak to someone. That's where the telephony aspect of this comes into play. Then there's the streaming and there's the recording. For businesses, you will want to record some of these conversations to be able to improve the experience for your customers. Then there's the intelligence layer, there's the speech to text, there's the agent orchestration. Agent orchestration is just going through multiple rounds of the LLM querying a tool. For example, like a customer is asking information about why an order is not delivered, then the LLM has to call the tool to actually go fetch the information about the order. Then the information about the order is fed back into the LLM. Then the LLM processes that information along with the user's initial query to actually synthesize a response. All of those are under agent orchestration. Then there's the prompt and memory management. This is for things like ChatGPT, where the agent is actually expected to learn from previous interactions. So because you don't want to be repeating the same thing to an agent several times. And one interesting thing that we may or may not know is the fact that LLMs are actually stateless. And what that means is the fact that for every time we send a request to the LLM, we're basically sending everything newly. So it's like there's a brain where it's like every time we ask the brain for something, we literally have to send everything. We send the message I, a response back with an I. We'll send the message, how are you? Now we'll send the I and the I, then the how are you? We're sending it back to get the next response. Oh, what's the weather like in Ottawa today? we send that, the LLM responds back, oh, okay, what's like, is there going to be snow? Now, that is referencing a context from the previous message. Now, the LLM itself doesn't actually know the previous message. It's actually the tools that actually connect to the LLM that has to send those history back and send it back to the LLM for it to actually know how to answer it. So that is where prompts and memory management comes into play. And I guess one other thing I would also stress when it comes to prompting, gone are the days where the LLMs were not so great at following instruction. One of the things I found of late is that they are very, very good at following instructions, but we need to provide the instructions. Essentially, you need to provide the instructions. Like LLMs are good at executing, but ultimately the judgment, actually comes from the human. The human that is actually prompting, that is actually telling the LLM what to do, and that is actually where the prompt, comes into play. There's the large language model. I've talked about it already. And there's the text-to-speech. Now, there's the business layer of things, which is knowledge base. Knowledge base is basically, what's the information. It could be for, say, using an LLM in a sales context. That could look like our sales playbook. For people that are working in sales, there's scripts. So if you have this objection, this is the response you provide. When you're creating, for the first time, this is how you actually, the customer, tailors this conversation towards this direction. This is how you bring the conversation back. There are all of those playbooks. So, it's on a call with customer is not a place where you start figuring things out. You have to have figured out a lot of those things prior to this call, and you're basically just executing in an execution mode where you're trying to get a particular goal, a goal met. So there's the business tools that I've talked about, providing the tools for the LLM to be able to perform functionalities. There's the CRM, there's the ATS, scheduling systems, workflow automations. Now there's the operational layer as well, which just involves things like analytics, reporting, monitoring, observability, human handoff, essentially knowing when to actually hand off to a human. One scenario that is very, very sensitive, for example, healthcare. You definitely don't want an AI system diagnosing a particular disease or like a particular symptom. For scenarios like that, it's very, very important to actually instruct the AI and actually provide it the necessary tools to actually redirect to a doctor. Exactly. So which is why this is very, 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 very important. Then compliance audits, obviously for fields where things compliance is very, very important. Regulations is very, very important. That's where this comes into play. And what's the next thing? What are some of the challenges with voice agents? And this is not necessarily just limited to just voice agents. It's challenges that are common to general AI systems right now. Actually, the latency is particular to accuracy, hallucinations. That's just the AI making stuff up. Behind the scenes, even though we see LLMs and AI systems as these very, very intelligent machines, what they do behind the scenes are basically like that. They predict. That's what they do, behind the scenes. But they've gotten, really, really good, and they've gotten so much data where they can actually predict with a very, very high level of confidence and sometimes accuracy. Because they've been trained, to actually get very, very good at this. Or, the fact that they predict just means that they are liable to make mistakes, and whenever they, make things up, that's basically what we call, hallucination. Sometimes incorrect actions, like you're supposed to do A and it ends up doing B. Now, latency. Latency is more particular to voice agent in the sense that latency is the speed of response. Whenever two people are having conversations, there's something where internally we just have like a clock where we know we're supposed to respond, at a certain time. Like, someone talks, I respond back, someone talks, I respond back. It's gonna feel weird if someone says something and the other person waits for 3 seconds to respond back. Then I count 1, 2, 3. Hi, how are you? Then my name is Olu. 1, 2, 3. No, my name is Victory. It's gonna feel very, very weird and very, very unnatural. If the AI system is actually taking so long, to actually respond, which is why latency is a very, very big, challenge when it comes to dealing with voice agents. Then another thing is actually interruptions. And this is actually quite interesting because there's a whole field of research around detecting when a user is done talking and when the user is supposed to, the user continues talking. So you don't want a system where the AI is very aggressive to respond when the user is actually still talking, and all of a sudden it starts to glitch and it starts to feel very, very weird, it starts to feel very, very unnatural. And I think humans also have a bias against AI, where once they detect they are speaking with an AI system, it tends it tends to be a turn off. So this is actually still an issue currently, but it's getting fixed. Another thing is localization. Again, very, very important because things like languages, things like accents, are very, very important, especially in communities where imagine I go to a Middle Eastern community, I don't want to be talking to the support with a British accent. There's gonna be that negative bias already. So if I'm talking to an agent who that is speaking in my accent, speaking in the way I speak, can't even speak my language. Literally, the experience is generally more pleasurable, both from the customer side of things and the company side of things as well, which is very, very important. And reliability, it has to work. It really, really has to work. And another issue with AI system is the cost. Because as I mentioned that the LLMs themselves, the AI systems, they are stateless, where every previous interaction we actually have to send it to them. So as a conversation starts to grow, then the cost starts to grow as well. So a conversation that's that has taken 20 months, but basically sending 20 prior messages, and for every message that is very, very long, the cost just compounds. So it's still an issue right now. So yeah, my concluding phase is just building a voice agent is easy, but building one that businesses can trust is much, much harder. Now, I do have a demo that I prepared. I'll just show you guys. So this was one that I created. The platform itself is still pretty early stage. It hasn't launched yet. It's still on the wait list for, as part of our experiments. I'm going to dial a number right now. How can I help you today? Are you exploring the platform or need help with something? Are you looking to explore open dashboard or do you need help with something? Hi, Olu. Nice to meet you. What kind of business do you run? And what are your current challenges with managing leads, workflows, or operations? I'm actually in the demo right now. I just wanted to test out the functionalities of voice agents. What can you tell me about that? Open Dashboard leverages AI to enhance various aspects of business management, including voice agents. Our AI capabilities can automate tasks, personalize outreach, and manage operations seamlessly. If you're interested in how AI voice agents can specifically integrate into your processes, I recommend scheduling a detailed demo to explore tailored solutions. Would you like to set one up? I'm just going to close this now. Well, that's basically an AI itself that was pre-programmed to actually answer a question about the platform. And behind the scenes, there's even two sets of voice agents that we would see. This one, I'm not too sure I put this in the slides, but yeah, there's two. The first one is just the ones that basically just accept a single instruction. Oh yeah, this is what you should do. These are the kind of questions you need to answer and stuff like that, and they answer it immediately. There's also the second types that are more advanced. We call them conversational AI agents, where even though the conversation itself is actually flowing, behind the scenes, what is actually happening, just like in anything that we will see in a few minutes, there are actually nodes. Each node represents an aspect of the conversation. So as the user is actually talking to the AI, the user is actually in one particular node with this particular set of instructions. This way, we can actually build AI agents that can actually handle complicated scenarios. For example, so an AI agent that is built for sales and support it has the first note as asking the user, what are you interested in? Are you interested in getting to know about the platform? Are you interested in, like, there's a certain challenge that you want to fix? If the user says sales, then it starts to go into like the sales part and starts to figure out what kind of information, what kind of sales related information is this person trying to find out. But if it's things like support, then it goes through another pathway that figures out, okay, are you an existing user? What's your email? What challenges, how do I direct you to actually solve the problem? I don't want to just talk about this very quickly from LLMs to agentic systems. So I talked about this briefly, prior. So like I did want to make a very, very big distinctions between the LLMs and the RNs. So the LLMs are basically just the models themselves. Like that's the GPT-4 or the Claude Sonnets, the Opus, the DeepSeeks. They basically provide you the reasoning, the language understanding, and the content generation. While the harness is what a lot of us actually interact with. So things like ChatGPT, Claude Code, Claude Web, Cursor, OpenClaw, Anything, Voicelink, that's where we define the prompts. That's where we define the memory. That's where we define the tools, the workflows, the approvals, the observability. I'll be concluding soon. So AI is a tool. It's not a decision maker. No, the models are getting better at following instructions, using tools and completing tasks. But human judgment remains essential for setting goals, for evaluating outcomes, and making decisions. AI can execute, humans decide what needs to be executed. And again, just reinforcing my points, the future isn't just AI, it's actually a collaboration between AI and humans. Humans set the goals, provide the AI harness, which executes the tools and workflow, and the humans, review it. This is the two products, my company was Voicelink and Cowden, and yes, thank you. So if you want to check it out, that's a link to actually check it out. And if you have opportunities for partnership or something, you can also reach out. So in case anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.